Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into something absolutely fascinating today, the completely wild mirror image between biological and artificial learning. On the surface, how a human adult learns from real-world experience and how a cutting-edge algorithm trains on massive amounts of data, well, they seem like two entirely different universes, right? But, as we're going to see today, they are shockingly similar. So, let's dive right in.
Before we get into any heavy concepts, I want to pose a pretty big question to you. What does it actually mean to learn? Just take a second and think about your own assumptions here. Is learning just, reading a textbook and memorizing a bunch of random data points? Or is it something much deeper than that? Because true learning, whether you're a living, breathing person or a complex machine, isn't about perfectly reciting the past. It's about taking what you've already seen and applying it to situations you literally have never encountered before. It's the complex, beautiful process of generalization.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the science of learning, then we'll move to the human framework, discuss teaching the machine, explore statistical invariance, and finally, look at the convergence of these two distinct worlds.
Part 1. The Science of Learning, Finding the Baseline.
To truly grasp artificial intelligence, we first have to look in the mirror at human intelligence. How do we actually process and keep information? Well, the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension highlights this really fantastic insight. They say optimal pacing is challenging people just beyond their present level of ability. And that tells us something so fundamental about the biological learner. Basically, we absolutely require a carefully calibrated environment. If it challenges way beyond our current ability, what happens? We get frustrated and we quit. If it's too easy, we get completely bored and learn absolutely nothing. We need a structured environment that dynamically pushes us to adapt.
Part 2. The Human Framework, Moving Beyond Memorization.
So how exactly does that adaptation actually work in adults? Let's look at Malcolm Knowles' groundbreaking 1984 theory, which digs into the mechanics of adult human learning. Knowles drew this massive, really important distinction between pedagogy, which is childhood learning, and andragogy, which is adult learning. When we're kids, we're totally dependent, right? We learn subjects just because a teacher tells us we might need them someday. But as adults, it's a whole different ballgame. Andragogy shows that we are self-directed and problem-centered. Crucially, as adult learners, we actively need to know the reasons why we're learning something. We learn by doing, and we demand immediate application to the real-world problems we're facing right now.
Think about the very last time you had to learn a completely new software tool at work. Successful adult learning programs, they don't rely on strict memorization. That just doesn't work for us. Instead, they focus on task-oriented processes. In that kind of environment, the teacher isn't some dictator lecturing from a podium. No, they act as a facilitator. Their job is to provide a safe space for adults to learn through experience, trial, and, of course, error. This cognitive scale builds linearly, and it's beautifully illustrated by the 2001 revision of Bloom's cognitive hierarchy. You can see it starts at the very bottom with basic data recall, just remembering facts. But to achieve true cognitive mastery, we are forced to move up that ladder. We have to understand the main ideas, apply them to brand new contexts, analyze the relationships, evaluate our decisions based on actual evidence, and finally, at the very peak of the hierarchy, create something entirely new. Memorizing the data, that's really just step 1.
Part 3. Teaching the Machine, the Algorithmic Pivot.
Okay, here's the crucial pivot. If this is how incredibly complex and structured human learning is, how on earth do we translate these human cognitive steps into a mathematical framework for a computer? The answer actually began to take shape in 1984, which, fun fact, is the exact same year Malcolm Knowles published his adult learning theory. Computer scientist Leslie Valiant introduced PAC learning, which stands for Probably Approximately Correct. This was a massive, game-changing breakthrough because it finally brought computational complexity theory into the realm of machine learning. The goal here is for the machine to select a generalization function that, with high probability, that's the probably part, will have a low error rate, which is the approximately correct part. It's kind of like trying to draw a circle around all the cats in a picture full of animals without accidentally circling a dog.
To do this safely and effectively, algorithms need really rigid boundaries. PAC learning uses some very specific parameters to set those up. First, we have the instance space. Think of this as the entire universe of possible samples or pieces of data the machine could ever possibly look at. Then, there's the concept, which is the actual target pattern or subset we want the machine to recognize. And finally, the hypothesis. That's the rule or the generalization function the machine actually selects to guess the concept. It's essentially the machine mapping out its environment, desperately trying to draw a line between what is correct and what isn't.
Part 4. Statistical Invariance. Vapnik's Complete Theory.
While pack learning gave us a really rock-solid foundation, modern artificial intelligence has pushed the boundaries even further. Let's look at Vladimir Vapnik and Rauf Ismailov's 2020 Complete Statistical Theory of Learning. In this framework, we have three main players. First, there's nature, which randomly generates our raw data, our vectors. Then there's the object, which takes that raw data from nature and assigns a classification to it, basically acting as a conditional probability function. And then there's our learning machine. The learning machine watches the raw data coming from nature, looks at the classification made by the object, and then tries to estimate that exact optimal conditional probability function.
Now, I know terms like reproducing kernel Hilbert space and Fredholm integral equations sound completely intimidating. But stick with me, because the conceptual breakthrough here is what really matters. Vapnik and Ismailov realized that just blindly minimizing standard square loss on raw data is highly inefficient. So instead of calculating every single grain of sand, so to speak, the algorithm operates in a special mathematical space to totally bypass raw brute force calculus. The massive takeaway here? The machine ends up needing significantly fewer training examples to achieve incredibly high performance. That is huge.
So how exactly does it do that? Well, traditional algorithms rely on something called strong convergence, which means learning directly from massive amounts of raw data. It's exactly like trying to pass a test by memorizing every single possible answer on the study guide. But the newer LUSI algorithms, which stands for Learning Using Statistical Invariance, incorporate weak convergence. They actually learn the underlying statistical rules, or predicates. It's like learning the mathematical formula itself instead of just memorizing the test sheet. By using both strong and weak convergence at the exact same time, the algorithm is able to select the absolute best approximation.
Part 5. Convergence of two worlds, the ultimate parallel.
All right, this is where we bring the whole shebang together. We are going to connect the dots between human andragogy and the Lucy machine learning framework we just covered. On the biological side, human andragogy tells us that adult humans straight up reject blind memorization. We actively need to know the rules, the context, and the reasons why so we can solve problems experientially. On the artificial side, the algorithmic Lucy framework has evolved to do the exact same thing. It rejects blind data memorization in favor of understanding the underlying rules. It uses predicates to artificially constrain its hypothesis space. It's just this brilliant irony, right? The absolute most advanced mathematical machine learning theories we have today were ultimately forced to mimic the exact way an adult human naturally learns.
It all really boils down to this. Learning and teaching theories function better as resources than as rules. Whether we're talking about a biological brain or an artificial neural network, the ultimate goal of learning is literally never just to blindly memorize a dataset. The goal is dynamic adaptation. It is the profound ability to take structured resources from our environment and generalize them so we can conquer the unknown. I want to leave you with this final, truly provocative thought. We saw earlier in Bloom's taxonomy that humans have multiple domains of learning. Machines are absolutely mastering the cognitive domain right now, the intellect, the analysis, the synthesizing of data. But what about the affective domain, the part that governs our values, our emotions, our empathy? Or the psychomotor domain, which governs our physical reflexes and real-world instincts? Will an algorithm ever be able to genuinely internalize human values or physically react to the world the way we do? That, my friends, is the next great frontier. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and keep asking those big questions.